If you enjoy this video, please remember to subscribe if you haven't already. And if you like what you see on my channel and would like to support me on Patreon, click on the link below.
Well, I'll tell you, seriously, what makes it different from any other show on television is that it's really science fiction. Science fiction in the best sense of the word. It's exciting drama, action, adventure, placed in the future. The stories will involve human beings in jeopardy. Sometimes me, I play Captain Kirk of the spaceship. Sometimes other people, but although there are monsters and fights and runnings and carryings on, it has to do with people, and that's what science fiction, true science fiction is.
Gene was very special. I mean, only Gene could create a show like Star Trek. In many ways, he really was a visionary, someone who brought a whole different perspective to television. He felt that television was a potent medium that was being wasted with the kind of pap that we had on television at that time.
The impact that it had on people at a given time and point in history was so strong and so positive that the future was worth living.
In 1964, Desilu Studios was looking for a new original idea for a TV show to pitch to the network, when in walked a brash young writer by the name of Gene Roddenberry, with a fresh, unique idea for a television show. At this time, he already had worked on a number of shows including Dr. Kildare, Highway Patrol, Wagon Train, and The Lieutenant in 1962.
I thought after a few years a person would start to grow a little.
Everybody's got a right to settle scores but us. Is that it? I'm nobody's Uncle Tom, Norma. I'm a man. I've got a right to feel and act like a man.
Well, if jumping somebody's all it takes, then why don't you trade that nice uniform in for a funny white sheep with a pointed cap and a burning cross?
It could have been any two lieutenants, but he made one black and one white. He wanted to write about the human condition, and he was adamant about this.
Very few people in those days read science fiction, and almost no network executives or studio heads.
In casting the part of Spock, Roddenberry originally wanted Martin Landau.
I turned down Star Trek. It would have been torturous. I mean, I would have probably died playing that role.
For the role of Spock, they cast an unknown actor by the name of Leonard Nimoy.
How about the others?
I think they're all dead.
You're in pretty bad shape yourself. Take it easy and I'll call for an ambulance.
No. First you must stop the bomb.
I acted in one of those called Zombies of the Stratosphere. And yes, I was one of the zombies.
Yeah, I did this job in an episode of the Lieutenant series. A few weeks after I finished the job, my agent called me and said, Gene Roddenberry, producer of the Lieutenant show, saw the footage, was interested in you, liked what you did, and said that he has in mind for you a role in a pilot that he's developing for a science fiction series. A lot of pilots, particularly in those years, many pilots were made that never became a series. A couple more months went by, and my agent called again on this subject and said, Gene Roddenberry would like to see some other work that you've done. As I mentioned before, in The Lieutenant, I played this flamboyant actor character, celebrity kind of guy, very cocky ego. We sent him a videotape of a TV show that I'd done, a performance that I'd given on a Dr. Kildare show, in which I played a very quiet, shy guy who befriended a blind girl and quoted poetry to her, and a very sensitive, nice character. So we sent him that. Word came back that he had seen that show, but had not connected me with that performance because it was so different from what I did for him in The Lieutenant, so he was impressed. And the next call came, not long after that Gene Roddenberry wanted to meet. I went to the meeting, and he was very congenial, and said, let's take a walk. And he walked me over to the scenic design department. He showed me the plans of the sets that were being built, introduced me to the scenic designer, walked me over to the prop department, showed me some of the props that were being made. Wardrobe department, same thing. Here's some sketches of the clothes. This is interesting. It's like he's selling me on doing this job. That if I keep my mouth shut, I might have a job here. You know? He started talking about this character that he had in mind. He told me a little bit about the character, that he would be from another planet, but half human.
Well, the original idea that Gene Roddenberry had was that Spock should be red, literally red. The problem was that in 1966, when we went on the air, there was still a lot of black and white TV sets operating, and the red just went totally black. So Spock became a black person, and that wasn't the intention. So we did away with the red and went to this yellowish look.
We did the first pilot, and it was cerebral. And then we did the second pilot, and my character started to chill out gradually. It was clearer in the writing and clearer to us in the makeup department that he should be cooler. More controlled, more logical, more intellectual, rather than a hot character. Well, I think it was a process of development. It wasn't all there from the start. There were clues and there were potential opportunities, but I remember, I think it was the very first episode we were filming, that there was a scene in which the ship was being threatened by some outside problems, an outside dangerous force. And there was a lot of activity on the ship. The captain is saying, do such and such, press this button, do this, warp 3, get us out of here, and so forth. I think I'm remembering correctly that Spock had one word to say, and the word was fascinating. And we're looking at this thing on the screen, and everybody else is reacting, oh, look at it, blah, 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 blah. And I got caught up in that energy, and I said, fascinating.
I'd like to know what this role is that you play. Just what is the role that you're striving for?
Basically, Mr. Spock is a product of a marriage between an Earth woman and a Vulcan male. Vulcan is a planet outside of our solar system. And he's physically very similar to the human in anatomy, but his psychological and emotional orientation are quite different. He has complete emotional control. He is very scientifically oriented and is a very logical creature.
I wanted to sell my series, so I had promised the network that my Star Trek idea would be little more than a space western. A wagon train to the stars, zap guns instead of six-shooters, spaceships instead of horses. But as I began writing that pilot, I suddenly realized that here was a chance to do the kind of drama I'd always dreamed of doing. I had seen science fiction movies before, but I'd always thought to myself, not enough characterization, not enough motivation. Perhaps I could use this as an excuse to go to those far-off planets with little polka-dotted people if necessary, and be able to talk about love, war, nature, God, sex, all those things that go to make up the excitement of the human condition. And maybe the TV censors would let it pass because it all seemed so make-believe. The original pilot even had a different captain, Jeff Hunter. Back in those days before the phrase women's lib was ever heard, I put a woman second in command of our starship. On top of which my script required our actress, Majel Barrett, to play this woman as having a highly superior computerized mind.
Now, she does a good job, all right. It's just that I can't get used to having a woman on the bridge.
The network was less than impressed with the pilot and thought what the show needed was more adventure and excitement.
And when the network finally saw the pilot, some of their executives were outraged. And I can't say I really blame them. For the considerable money they had put up, they certainly did not get a Western space opera. The network's very top program executive was impressed by the fact that this film made him feel as if he'd actually been flying in a spaceship. Doing something almost never done before, the network ordered a second pilot.
But they said to Roddenberry, it's a very interesting premise. Let's do another pilot. I'd never heard of that before or since.
For the first time in TV history, a second pilot was commissioned. Jeffrey Hunter was replaced by actor William Shatner, who would go on to play Captain James T. Kirk.
The only people that were in the original that stayed over was Leonard Nimoy, although he looked quite a bit different then, and he was not the emotionless Vulcan then.
I remember when I saw the pilot that they had made, and it was wonderful, a wondrous pilot, wondrous story, magical and so entertaining. The pilot with Jeffrey Hunter, that I thought, wow, I had done a pilot the year before on Alexander the Great, in which we ran around in little skirts and rode horses in the desert. And that looked like it was going to go, and then it failed and didn't sell. So when this pilot came up, I thought, I don't think I have many more chances here. And I got to choose very carefully, and this just appealed to me. And so I was caught up in the magic of Star Trek.
So I saw the pilot. The mistake they made, I felt, was that, the captain sat there and said, turn left, or starboard, or fire the guns, as though it were momentous. Whereas it becomes more fun if it's immediate. Oh my God, let's get out of here. Turn left. And I suggested that, and they sort of bought it, and the second pilot became a lighter vehicle.
And Bill relished the role. I mean, you see an actor bite into a role and devour it and make it totally his.
Captain Kirk was the ideal role for him.
And then there was another, I had to play another evil Captain Kirk. I played a Nazi. So what do you do about a Nazi? Well, a Nazi kind of militaristic, So the gestures were kind of, oh, God, that hurts. Were kind of short and sharp and militaristic. Kind of, this is the way you're going to do it. Like this. Oh, man, I kept doing that all week.
It's fun, though, isn't it?
Yeah, it is kind of fun, but as I say...
That sounds like method acting, is it?
It's a form of method acting because you have to pick an image, go spontaneously with something, and use whatever you're thinking of and use it fully and do it as authoritatively as you can. Sometimes you're wrong,
Hailing frequencies open, sir.
I was pleased that in those days, when you couldn't get even blacks on television, that I not only had a black, but a black woman and a black officer.
Back in the 60s, there was a fierce amount of censorship that was going on. And you couldn't talk about things. You couldn't talk about war. You couldn't talk about black-white problem. You couldn't even talk about mother love, and I'll never understand why for that. But there was a whole list of taboos. And Gene always wanted to tell people how he felt about it. He didn't care whether, they did or not, but he'd like to kind of set an example and talk about it, and he wasn't allowed to. So he figured, well, maybe if I put these people in funny costumes and stick them out into space, I can get by the censors with it, and by God, he did.
Most of the people we cast were not well known. I mean, they weren't in a lot of television series. Probably the most well-known person was DeForest Kelley. Dee was in Westerns for many, many years, always the bad guy.
Well, when I came in, you see, I was not an either pilot of the series. I had done another film for Gene Roddenberry. He screened one of the pilots for me, and he had wanted me from the beginning, but the network or someone there didn't want me because I had been playing heavies for about 8 or 9 years. A lot of Westerns and that sort of thing, and evidently they couldn't see me in the role. He screened this for me, and I saw the part of the physician who was played by another fine actor, a character man named John Hoyt. And it was, he was in maybe one scene in the movie, but it was a very effective scene in the television film. And I felt that it was a marvelous opportunity if this character could grow and expand. And I talked to Gene about that, and he thought maybe that it could. And then after we got into it, the fans began to pick up on McCoy. And so they began to feed him more and more, and as time went by, he became more important.
McCoy is really a country doctor, so to speak, a man who hates to see all of this modernization falling in on him too fast. We're beginning to lose that humanity.
He was deceptively good in the role, and without showing a lot of effort. And the chemistry between he and I developed very quickly on the insult banter level. He would call me pointy-eared, green-blooded, whatever, and I would call him a witch doctor, and we'd be off.
Gene said, I like the name Uhuru, but it's a little harsh. I don't know yet whether I want it to be first name or last name. And I said, why don't we do an alliteration of it and do it Uhura? And he wanted this to be international, interracial. And that's how Uhura became from the United States of Africa.
These were incredible times. In '66, we were fighting for freedom.
Was called one day to read for Star Trek, and because I do a lot of accents, they said, please do a lot of accents. So I read the same lines, about 5 or 6 lines, and I did about 5 different accents, and they picked the Scottish.
2 accents, right.
Yeah, so they picked the Scottish, and of course I was delighted with that, because I think that the tradition of an engineer is a Scotsman, you know, because all the great motor ships and the steamships of the world were built in the Clyde. So we just had to have a Scottish engineer aboard that, you know. We need some repair, sir, but the ship is intact. Scots have always been shipbuilders and ship engineers and so on.
I got a call from my agent one day saying that, you know, there's an interview with a man named Gene Roddenberry, whom I didn't know from Adam at that time. The thing that perked my ears up was he said that it's for a running part in a pilot film with a good chance for becoming a series. Went to the interview, met Gene Roddenberry, had a wonderful conversation, but walked out of there, frankly, thinking that I didn't get the part, that I'm not the right person that he was looking for, because we talked about everything under the sun, except about me in relationship to the project. Generally, they ask, you know, what had you done before, you know, where did you study, what director did you work with, that sort of thing. Gene Roddenberry wasn't that way at all. We talked about current events, some of the movies that I had enjoyed, you know, and so I thought this was his very gentlemanly way of saying thank you, but no thank you. But, you know, rather than saying that, he was making social conversation and then easing me out. So I got, you know, on the phone after I walked out of there and said to my agent, you know, he's a wonderful man. I really enjoy the conversation, but I don't think I'm going to be cast. And he said, why is that? And I explained it to him. 3 days later, my agent called again and said, George, how wrong you are. You're cast.
I recognized right away it was a breakthrough role for me because, you know, most Asian or Asian American roles at that time were rather stereotypical and one-dimensional, and usually with an accent. Here was a character who was a part of the leadership team, carrying his weight, contributing to the success of the whole enterprise. No accent. It was a thrilling description of an Asian American character.
So I came in, I read, and it was an interesting reading. It was a very serious scene, but they said they wanted me to read it with a Russian accent. So I saw that the ship is about to disintegrate. It's about to explode. So I assumed that was the intention with which they wanted me to read the part. So I said, Captain, the ship is about to explode. What are we going to do? And after I got done with what I thought was, a riveting performance, they said, yeah, but could you make it funny? Funny? Where is the funny in these lines? But deciding that the part was more important than my artistic integrity, I said, Captain, guess what? The ship is about to blow up. And they loved it.
I got a lot of mail, on lined paper and pencil, telling me I was groovy. And it was because they were using as their prototype Davy Jones, the Monkees. They wanted long hair. They wanted the Monkees look. Shipped me off to Max Factor, big cosmetic hair place on Hollywood Boulevard, and I came back with 4 or 5 different wigs, blonde and red and brunette, and I tried them all on, and they looked at me, and then they tried them all on, which was really peculiar, I thought. I said, what am I getting myself into?
I was just livid with jealousy, I'll fess up, and frustration. I hadn't met Walter Koenig. I hated the name Walter Koenig. And we had to share a dressing room to boot.
Bill Hatch was the head of the music at Desilu, and Star Trek was a Desilu production. So he said, how would you like to write a theme for this thing? And we'll see, if Roddenberry likes it. Well, I did it in a week, and between working at Fox and I don't know, there must have been about a half an hour of music at least in it. I composed it, orchestrated it, and conducted it.
I went into the booth and we were all sitting around and they were talking about the fact that they had not been able to get the proper kind of sound for the spaceship going across the screen as, you know, in the beginning of the main title. And so I said, well, what's the matter? And they said, well, we can't we tried electronic things, and we tried this and that. I said, look, you can't, it won't cost you anything. Give me a microphone and give me the picture. So I went out on the stage and watched the screen. And as it went by, there was the microphone. I just went, and that's what they used.
So you're the sound effect of the Enterprise whooshing by in space.
That's what they told me. When I was a little kid and I used to listen to the radio, there was a song by Richard Whiting called Beyond the Blue Horizon. And it had a long tune. And underneath this tune, they used to have usually an accordion player or something like that. They're going ticka 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 ticka, you see, about triple time. You see, so on with this long tune and all of this ticka 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 underneath it, you know, the train. I thought, well, I should have a long thing that goes out into space, and it keeps going out into space, and everything's going to be long, and it goes, you know, lyrically, as it were, without lyrics, over a fast-moving accompaniment.
We started off, as most shows start off, with not sufficient scripts in hand. In fact, I think we only had about one or two. And we were one jump ahead of the Sheriff all the way down that first season. We were delivering episodes to the network at times on the very day that they were broadcast.
Gene worked on those scripts because I know I was there with him. I would say at least 3 to 4 nights a week, and sometimes all weekend long, until maybe 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. I can remember walking up to the set and delivering sheets of paper to them that were scripts just from working all night long.
We were quite a different United States then. One can over-intellectualize what we did on Star Trek, but we always told stories of action, adventure. There was always a want, a need, a goal, feelings, and we were the only show, for example, during all of the dreadful Vietnam affair, only dramatic show that ever talked against Vietnam. Kirk playing essentially the role of our presidents in those years, where he'd gotten into it and he was having trouble getting out of it. Vietnam would have ended many years sooner if it had been on dramatic shows on television, because the impact of these dramatic shows.
Do you remember the 20th century brush wars on the Asian continent? It went on bloody year after bloody year. Well, what would you have suggested? The only solution is what happened back then. Balance of power.